Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Ivan Thorp. As a young child, I contracted polio about at the age of 7. Fortunately, I was able to come through. Behind me over here is the Smith gravesite. It's the gravesite of my parents, my grandparents on my mother's side, Jacob and Bertha Valentine Smith. Jacob was born in Denmark in 1838. He immigrated to the U.S. 15 years later, landed in the New York area and continued to live out there for about 10 years as he sailed on schooners and steamships on the East Coast and also came through the Great Lakes. As he finally made it to Ephraim in the early 1860s, where he bought some property, clerked in some of the stores, and eventually built his own general store on the site of what is now the Ephraim Information Center. There's a large stained glass window in the Ephraim Moravian Church that bears his name. His wife Bertha was born in Norway in 1838. She immigrated to Ephraim with her Valentine family, some of which are also buried back here. And they married. The two of them met and married here in Ephraim in 1868. A year later, they had their first child, Eugenia, who was born on the village at the family homestead in Ephraim. So now let's get over to the Thorp side of the family. My grandfather on the Thorp side was Adelbert. He was born in Oswego, New York in 1844. At an early age, his family moved to Toma, Wisconsin, where he spent his childhood. At the start of the Civil War in 1861, Adelbert joined at the age of 17, joined up with the Wisconsin Regiment of the Union Army and fought the entire length of the Civil War. When it ended in 1865, he moved back to Toma, married, and had his first son named Bert, B.D., who was my father. The family moved to Door County, settling in about 1875 in Door County. Moved from Toma to Door County and landed in Egg Harbor. Adelbert soon took up politics, became the town chairman for 2 terms, then went to work for the county as county clerk and sheriff, and did 2 terms in Wisconsin State Assembly in Madison. After going to school and graduating from high school, my father, B.D., took a job as a superintendent of the Sturgeon Bay Ship Canal, and where he worked for 20 years from 1891 to 1911. The canal was opened in 1880, allowing schooners and steamships to access the waters of Green Bay without having to go around the north end of the peninsula for an area that was called Death's Door.
Ships provided needed transportation for people and goods from Milwaukee and Chicago to the area.
After that job, from 1911 to 1920, he took a job in Milwaukee became the superintendent of the Milwaukee Harbor Construction Engineers Department. And a few years later, that name changed to the Army Corps of Engineers. Back to Eugenia. She grew up working in her dad's general store here in Ephraim, learning how to run a successful business. After graduating from high school, she attended the Oshkosh Normal School and obtained a teaching certificate. She then taught for her first 2 years over on Chambers Island.
2 years later, she moved to the Sunny Point School south of Egg Harbor. One Friday afternoon, she was trying to hitch a ride to Ephraim to visit her parents. Along came my dad, B.D., in his horse and buggy and offered her a ride to Ephraim. Little did they know, a year later, in 1893, they would be married.
Soon after my brother was born in early 1901, my parents started talking about building a big hotel in Ephraim. There had been already a couple hotels built, and Eugenia wanted to build the biggest and most modern hotel they could. They spent about 3 years planning it. Finally, they started work on it. The lumber came over the ice in the wintertime from the Marinette Menominee area, and they started work on the hotel.
In 1908, the Eagle Inn Hotel opened. On opening day, it had 30 rooms, a 125-seat dining room that offered a choice of 3 entrees at every evening meal. All bathrooms had hot and cold running water. Some rooms had their own bathrooms.
Our rooms had electric lights, but they provided a kerosene light as a backup because the local power company shut off power at 10 o'clock every night. The Eagle Inn soon became the standard by which all other hotels in Door County were judged. In the early days, many guests arrived on the steamships who would come in twice a day to the Anderson, or twice a week to the Anderson Dock.
Guests would often stay 2 to 3 months. Eugenia would ensure a buggy or later a car was there to meet the guests and load up their trunks for their summer stay. By the early 1920s, the hotel had 30 rooms, 14 cottages, and a 125-seat dining room. Her staff grew to 25 people, to include a full-time seamstress and Daisy, a female black chef. And her husband, Chester, was our chauffeur and bellhop. As automobiles became more popular, a 25-car garage was built to accommodate the vehicles, many of which were chauffeur-driven Packards, Lincolns, Duesenbergs, and Cadillacs. The owners expected their cars to be parked in a garage at night. Accommodations were also built for housing their chauffeurs.
My brother Glenn and I both married in the 1920s.
Our wives Bertha and Marion joined the family staff, both working in the kitchen of our family-run business. Bertha and I never had children. As our niece and nephew, Betty and Bert, were growing up, they were expected to help out wherever they could.
Opening day in 1908, we offered 6 rowboats for rent on our shoreline. Some say it's the first indication of first time any boats had ever been rented in Door County. Over the next 30 years, I devoted most of my time and my mother's money building what would soon be called the Eagle Inn Docks.
Mother Nature was not kind. What took months to build could be wiped out in hours or days by one strong thunderstorm, fall winds, or the spring ice shoves. Every spring I would hire 4 or 5 men to help me repair and rebuild the docks. Over time we developed better designs that could withstand more of what Mother Nature dished out. By the late 1930s, the Eagle Inn Docks included 3 main piers and numerous finger docks. The Eagle Inn and the docks were a very busy place. In 1937, my dad, B.D., passed away at the age of 68. His service was held on the grounds of Eagle Inn.
The Ephraim Yacht Club is very important to a lot of people in Ephraim, including myself. It was founded in 1906, but by the end of the late 30s, it still did not have its own clubhouse or its own dock.
In 1939, we reached an agreement where I leased the North Eagle Inn dock to the club on a yearly basis at $50 a year, which was raised to $100 a year in 1944. I also allowed the Bannon Cottage to be moved onto the east end of the dock property to serve as their clubhouse. A few years later, my mother asked Bertha and me to take over the hotel. My brother had no interest in running it. We took ownership in 1944. Eugenia continued to help supervise the staff until she passed away in 1952 at age 83. During this time, I was elected to serve as Ephraim Village President for 9 consecutive terms from 1938 to 1956. Running the hotel and docks was very demanding and time-consuming. We started thinking of selling the docks, but I wanted to make sure the Ephraim Yacht Club would always have a home. In 1952, we donated the Eagle Inn North Dock to the village of Ephraim, with the stipulation that the village would provide a 99-year lease to the Yacht Club for a fee of $100 per year. A commemorative plaque on the clubhouse recognizes this donation. In 1958, the remaining Eagle Inn docks were leased and later sold. 2 years later, we sold the hotel to our niece and nephew, Betty and Bert. The summer of 1962 marked the last season for my mother's beloved Eagle Inn Hotel. The 54-year-old hotel was torn down and the cottages were sold and moved off the property. A new 12-unit Eagle Inn Motel was built and opened in the spring of 1963. In 1966, I was honored to be selected the second Fearball chieftain by the residents of Ephraim. In 1978, my niece and nephew sold the Eagle Inn Motel and property to a developer. The The motel continued to be run for another year and then was sold and relocated by barge to Fish Creek, where it still stands today. The Ephraim Yacht Harbor condominiums were built on the original Eagle Inn property. I died in 1975 at the age of 80. In 1978, a flagpole was erected in my memory on the shorefront across from the Ephraim Village Hall. Thank you for listening to my story.